everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel. And today we are going to be doing part 1 of my September wrap up. And you're probably wondering, why would it be part 1? What does that even mean? And basically, if you follow me on Twitter, I did do a poll asking whether you guys would like me to break up my September wrap up into part 1 of just like my regular standard reading for the month, and then part 2 being my Latine Heritage Month wrap up. And then the other option was just like putting it all together, and you guys chose for me to break it up, and so I figured that's what I would do. I think this is what I've done for the most part every year that I have participated in reading books for Latine Heritage Month, and because it starts on September 15th and ends on October 15th, it is a little bit awkward when trying to do a full month of a September wrap up. So for the first half of the month of September, I read 4 books, and I'm really excited to talk about them with you. I will say that the reading that I did for the first half of this month wasn't the greatest moment of my life, but I feel like we ended it off on a high note. So I will start off with the first book that I read in September, which was How to Deal with Difficult People, Smart Tactics for Overcoming the Problem People in Your Life by Jill Hassan. And I believe that I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars, but it's kind of difficult for me to rate a book like this, you know what I mean? It's kind of a self-help book, but also not really. But I was really struggling at the beginning of this month and at the end of last month, and just really struggling with the way that I was dealing with people who were being difficult within my life. And so I figured that I would at least check out one book that was kind of dealing with this topic, and I ended up reading this one, and overall I do think it was pretty helpful and I would recommend it. Is it a perfect book that's going to change your life and is going to make everything so much better? Probably not, but I think that it did help in giving a lot of perspective and a lot of even though you can't control the way that other people act, you can at least control your reaction to how they act, you know what I mean? I think that's something that I personally want to work on a lot more, is just how I am reacting to the people around me, rather than trying to force everybody to do things in ways that I think that they should do them, you know what I mean? I think that this book was helpful. It wasn't perfect, but I think that it did start me off on the right path. The next book that I ended up reading was This Ravenous Fate by Haley Dennings, and this is a YA historical fantasy book set, I believe, in the 1920s, and features lesbians and vampires, as it's all kind of set against the backdrop of the Prohibition era. And I think that it does a lot of really interesting things, kind of blending all of those topics together. I think as I continue on my reading journey, especially the older I get, the less excited I am about young adult. But I think that if you are the type of reader who really likes, this might be a dated book comparison, but if you really like The Diviners by Libba Bray, this might be the perfect book for you. I feel like it's kind of a different perspective on that era, and a really fresh take on that era, and you also get it from the perspective of a queer Black author, which is really exciting. So while this might not have been one of my favorite reads of this month, I do think that there is definitely a YA audience for this book, and I think that if I had read it maybe when I was more in that age range of 17, 18, 19 years old, I might have really enjoyed this book. But I think for me now, I'm just not connecting with YA in the way that I used to. But I do highly recommend it if you're looking for a really fresh, interesting take on vampires, and you also want some lesbian queer romance. The next book that I read in the month of September was The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz, and this one is an adult thriller, and it actually did really remind me of the book Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which I believe I read earlier this year. I can't remember, don't hold me to it, but I really enjoyed Yellowface, and so when I read the description for The Writing Retreat, I was this kind of sounds like Yellowface. This might be something that I'm intrigued by. You know, it's about this young woman and she's been really struggling with getting her book published and stuff like that, like finding an audience for her book. And so she ends up signing up for this writing retreat with one of her favorite authors, and she gets selected and ends up going on this writing retreat and things go bad. And I loved that premise so much. I was really intrigued, so I was super excited to get into this book, but unfortunately it just did not hit the mark for me. And I think that I'm just like having a really tough time picking out thrillers, finding what I like, finding what I don't like. And this book does something that I've found that a lot of the thrillers that I pick up also do. And it's so weird, like it's really hard to describe, because it's like, I think that these authors are very clearly trying to like show that they are like liberals or whatever, you know what I mean? But the way that they write their characters is like in a way that just feels like it was written by an undercover conservative, if you know what I mean. Like it's very strange. And I don't know if it's just like because they're trying to like show some sort of skepticism in their main character, or I don't know what they're really trying to do. It's like very strange the way that they write. I feel like if you've read this book you might know what I mean. But it's just very hard to describe, and I'm just like, it's so unsettling in a way, in like a bad way, and it almost feels a little bit kind of like lip service, you know what I mean? Like it just feels very performative in a weird way. So not my favorite thing in the whole wide world. It almost feels like these authors feel obligated to include like, what are your pronouns, you know, what type of queer person are you know what I mean? Like it just feels like they're really trying to shoehorn in these things that like, and the way that they talk about them in text is just very strange, very awkward, very stilted, very much not natural. And I don't know if that's intentional, I don't know if that's not. I just feel like it's not intentional because I see it happen so many times. So it just feels weird, honestly. It really does. And I will also say that I didn't really like the ending. I felt like the ending was really rushed and just didn't really have the impact that I would hope that it would have, you know what I mean? It also kind of reminded me of a book that I read about a month or so ago called Such a Bad Influence, which is also a thriller and also kind of has a lot of the same sort of issues that I had with this book. I just don't know if it's that like the thriller genre is just not for me, but like I really like the idea of a thriller. I like a lot of the premises that I see. I really like the suspense and like the mystery and stuff like that, but just for some reason all of the thriller books that I tend to pick up just do not have the right execution for what I'm looking for. So if you have any recommendations for thrillers that you really enjoyed, definitely let me know, because I am on the lookout for them. And the very last book that I read in the first half of the month of September, I was about to say in all of September, I'm like, no, it's just the first half. The very last book that I read was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and I absolutely loved this book. This book made the entire first half of September worth it. It was so good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was incredible. This is the second Abby Jimenez book I've read of hers. I loved it. I don't even know how many more times I can say that. Like I really did. Like it really just worked for me on so many different levels, and it's a type of romance book that I really love, where it takes a lot of inspiration from like general fiction or literary fiction and infuses that into a romance plot. I feel like that's very much like Emily Henry or like Allie Hazelwood or Talia Hibbert, you know what I mean? Like it's just like it has more depth than just like a plain old run-of-the-mill romance novel, which I also love those as well. There are so many romance novels that are just purely like a romance novel that I love, but these are the type of ones that like really leave an impact on me. And this one was really great. It was about these two people, and they basically end up meeting each other because of a Reddit post. And in that Reddit post, the male main character, he kind of alludes to the fact that like every person that he dates ends up moving on from that relationship and finding the love of their life immediately after. And the female main character reads this Reddit post and is like, oh my gosh, that's like very similar to my situation. and they end up messaging each other and kind of become friends and a little bit more than that. And that premise really reeled me in, but I definitely stayed for a lot of like the friendship dynamics, the familial dynamics, the romance and the chemistry and like the storytelling. It was just so perfect on every single level. And I love how engaging her writing style is. Like, her books are so compulsively readable, and I think that that is what really will make or break a romance novel for me. I kept dreading the moments when I would have to put this book down and, you know, live my life or like talk to people or whatever. I was like, I just want to sit here and read this book and be in this world and see this romance play out. But like I said, I also really loved so many of like the other subplots that were going on at the same time. I think that at least in the 2 books of Abby Jimenez that I've read so far, she does such a great job at exploring the ways in which families have such a great impact on you, whether in a positive or a negative way. And I just really loved this one because like these 2 main characters had such unconventional family dynamics, and they're dynamics that I've never really seen explored, especially in romance. The male main character's mom has to go to prison, and so his family is dealing with all of that. And then the female main character has a single mom who is really flighty and is never really around, and is kind of like pushed her daughter onto another family and just is like kind of out there living her own life. And so it's really interesting to see how both of these dynamics play out and how they both impacted the lives of these 2 main characters. So I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if I loved it more than her other book, Yours Truly. I'm not sure. I feel like they're very like neck and neck for me. But yeah, I really love this book. I cannot wait to read more from Abby Jimenez in the future. But yeah, it was a really, really great way to end off the first half of September and then lead me into Latine Heritage Month. So yeah, those were all 4 of the books that I read in the beginning of September. A super short video, but I think that it was worth it to put out. And I will definitely get to my Latine Heritage Month wrap up somewhere around October 15th. So definitely keep an eye out for that later. Yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this wrap up. And if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links are down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!